All right, good morning, everyone. It's me, Smirk. Uh, this video is going to be about the tempo or pacing of the war, and it applies to our mystics. We have a lot more mage power this age than we did last age. It applies to our mystics, heretics, necromancers, um, and everyone else. So first, we're going to talk about everyone. Um, and just kind of overall, right? This is something I used to recommend to my kingdom when I was leading, and it made it so much easier for me as a war lead to get things done. Um, I have already posted in the Discord, but this is if you want a little bit more explanation about it. So let's start with end of war ceasefire and while we're waiting for a war, right? Typically we are in either some kind of war build already, full war build, which the orders for us to build were no banks at all, and a certain amount of towers. Um, so that's fine. We're fully pumped, right? We trained up to our 70,000 draft rate or whatever it is, and we're all ready to go. We all got full troops, etc. So what happens in war is you start making attacks and you start losing troops and you start gaining peasants, and acres, right? So you get more room uh, for stuff. Now, peasants alone do provide economy, but the enemy, the opponent, is always going to be trying to control our econ. So the only way to guarantee um, a rise in our own economy is banks. Um, that's the only way to guarantee it. Now, if the opponent isn't very good at controlling the econ, that's fine. Those banks will still provide extra, right? So, what does that mean? Um, right now, if you take a look at our own survey, we have almost no banks in the whole kingdom. This is why it's very difficult for us to fund dragons, train troops, and so on and so forth, right? Now, typically the idea is you train with credits and you build with credits, and then the rest of it is going towards dragon or training if we're doing an aiding mission, for example. Let's say somebody's chained and we're trying to pump their defense, or we have somebody that's close to a B and we're trying to pump their defense. We don't really have the resources for that. So what I normally tell my people to do is, hey, all of us as a team, we put extra into banks and towers primarily, and a few extra farms as well, right? Because funding dragon also requires food. You also randomly get people who are like starving, and you're like, oh shoot, we need to send food to this province real quick. What does this also do? This prevents us from having to use our stealth to steal it, right? One, we can't guarantee that the opponent will have resources to steal. Two, we can't guarantee that we'll be very successful in stealing, but we can guarantee what our build is going to be, right? Outside of them raising it and things like that. But even then, we still have some, right? We still have more than zero. And that's what we need. So what do I want to say with this? After your very first wave, assuming we've gotten war, so that's why I say after the first or second wave, you get incoming acres, right? Either if you're chained, kind of ignore this part a little bit. But honestly, even if you're chained, extra banks is something you probably want to do anyway, because you're going to be really struggling with your own econ, right? But that'll be more for your personal econ, not for the kingdom econ, right? If you're chained, you don't need to worry about funding the dragon. You need to worry about your own province, and you probably need to ask for aid. But for everybody else who isn't being chained or fireballed, actually, if you're being fireballed too. So anyway, everyone, but everybody else is going to be building extra banks. So let's say you get 100 acres uh, from your attack, right? And you have your nice little war build all set up, right? Take away, let's say, 40 of those 100 acres, put 20 into banks, 10 into towers, or 15, and 5 into farms. And then the rest put into your regular war build, right? You probably don't need quite as many guilds as you go throughout the war. Um, but you do want to maintain enough guilds so that your cast when you need to cast your self spells, you're not just failing and wasting runes. So you do still want to try to keep above your 10% guilds. But anyway, so you put those extra into banks and towers. Next round of acres come in, you get another 100 acres. Throw in another 40 into banks, towers, and farms, right? So now you've gotten up to like 40 banks and 20 extra towers and 10 extra farms. Um, that little bit may not seem like a lot for your own personal province, but as a whole kingdom, when you multiply it across the whole kingdom, you're producing a lot more econ. All right, that's from the banks. Now for the towers, which the point of the towers is econ destruction, right? What the best way to destroy opponent econ is with magic spells, fireballs specifically. Meteor showers also help. Um, Now mystics, this is where the mystics need to like. You're doing the same thing as everybody else, but you're doing it to a higher extreme because you're likely to be unbreakable. At least that, the majority of the strategies involve making your mystics unbreakable, especially for running pures, right? Which we are. Um, in this particular war, you guys are already unbreakable. So you need to build extra, even more banks and towers um, than everybody else, especially because you're the ones that are going to be casting the fireballs and you're the ones that are going to be primarily funding the dragons. So your aim is to reach at least 25% towers at this stage, if not higher. I think if let's look at the enemy real quick, like, oops, towers. Like this guy, he's got 30% towers, right? Even this heretic has 22%. This mystic has 20%. If you look at us, like the highest towers is a rogue, which is a little sad, right? Our mystics need to be higher. And then everybody else isn't too bad, to be honest, but the mystics really need to be higher. And I see that everybody is building more towers. So that's really good. We need to keep doing that. The only main thing is we also need to be building more banks. Mystics, make sure to keep your watchtowers high, at least 15% if you're able to. This isn't going to stop people from stealing runes from you, but it's going to reduce their success, right? And that's the whole point. Like when you try to think of it's like, oh yeah, well, 15% towers isn't going to stop anybody from doing anything to me, right? Sure, you're right. But if all of our mystics have 15% towers, then as a kingdom, we're losing less, right? So whoever they're trying to steal from, it's going to take more ops from them. It's going to, because you're reducing the damage, you're also increasing the chance for automatic failures. And so overall, you're causing less runes to be taken and more stealth to be used to do the taking. So it's a weird concept a little bit to think of like defense as a form of offense. But that applies to other things too. But we're not going to talk about that right now. We're just talking about the econ side of things. Econ is how you win wars pretty much always, right? At the end of the day, everybody's duking it out, attacking each other. Troops are going down through night strikes and massacres and et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, econ is what wins it. And once you establish econ superiority, you establish dragon control. Nobody can survive an onslaught of topaz or ruby dragons. Ruby is probably the best dragon, but it's expensive. So I typically just spam topaz dragons because you can't sit on topaz dragons forever. If you do, you're just killing yourself. Ruby is even more evil. But yeah, so I think I covered most of it. Oh, and the other thing is, for our kingdom specifically, we have, let's look at our attackers. We have humans, halflings, and gnomes, right? Gnomes and halflings, you should be trying to use Righteous Aggressor every single time. because there's no downside for it unless you already have 100% elites. If you have 100% elite army, obviously you don't need to use Righteous Aggressor. But if you have some offense specs mixed in, Righteous Aggressor will convert those offense specs into elites, which is going to increase your offense. So what does that mean? Whenever you do that, you're already increasing your offense. So you need to train some defense as well. I recommend, at least at this stage, and this is not always the case. So unlike the banks and towers thing, which should be always the case, this is not always the case. But for now, you should probably be looking to train 50 to 75% of your credits into defense specialists and the rest into offense specialists. You still want some offense specialists. You don't want to just go full defense unless there's like a really specific case scenario, like you're almost unbreakable and you're trying to reach that defense, or you're the opposite end. You've been chained all the way down and you have almost no defense. Then you probably need to do 100% defense specialists. Humans are a little different because your offense is your offense specialists, not elites. So you want to train 100% offense specialists with your credits pretty much always, even if you're chained. The difference is how much do you use your Righteous Aggressor. Righteous Aggressor for you as a human should probably be every other time if nothing is happening to you. If you're chained, probably every time. Now your defense won't come in right away. It'll come in when your army returns. But that's kind of nice because it comes in big chunks. So you make your attack, you do Righteous Aggressor, your army comes back with elites, with extra elites, which is your main form of defense. All right, did I get everything? Sorry if I'm talking kind of like urgently sounding. I'm not urgent. I'm not trying to like, it's just I'm trying to be quick because my videos tend to be really long and then people get exhausted. Also, I think my army is back soon. Anyway, I hope that was enough to cover the information. If you have any questions, obviously ask. If you have any ideas, obviously ask. These are just kind of basic things that I've picked up as a war lead in previous wars that have helped tremendously for winning wars. They're not going to, completely change everything. And the strategy, you can still strategize and do whatever we do, which is, the mass NS thing. None of that needs to change. Just what you're building. But yeah, all right, that's it. All right.